You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 239. Biohacking your way to better sleep and less brain fog with Tanessa Shears. If you're a business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve your time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I am really excited about today's episode and for you to get the opportunity to meet our guest, Tanessa Shears. Tanessa Shears is a kinesiologist, certified sleep science coach, and host of the Becoming Limitless podcast. She helps entrepreneurs scale their business by optimizing their health, focus, and productivity with science and biohacking. Her passion is working closely with business owners to implement effective sleep, nutrition, movement, and out-of-the-box stress management strategies to eliminate brain fog and wake up feeling well-rested, energized, and focused. She does this by optimizing the performance capacity of your body and brain so you can produce more meaningful, impactful work output and scale your business faster. Well, with that intro and bio, you can definitely tell why I asked Tanessa to be a guest on the podcast today. In today's episode, you will discover what brain fog is and how it shows up to plague your business, how to combat immense brain fog, what biohacking is and how to get started, what vision you need to be selling yourself on, the magical results when you maintain a consistent bedtime, how social jet lag and REM sleep affect your mood and patience, ways to improve your sleep right away, how long it takes to biohack yourself out of sleep deprivation, and so much more. Look, this is an action-packed, so much value in today's episode. I really hit it off with Tanessa because we share the desire to really focus on and help business owners show up as their best selves. And if you've been a listener for some time, you know that I highly prioritize who we are personally, our health, our mindset, and sleep is a big part of that. And one of the challenges with showing up our best selves is that brain fog, that not being able to think and focus and clarity and the motivation, because brain fog is a very real thing. So stay tuned to today's episode to hear all of the biohacking tips and tricks from Tanessa. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome to Productivity Straight Talk, Tanessa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great today. How are you?
Good. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And this is one of those times where I had so many questions waiting to ask you. And then I'm like, we don't know each other, so we should just hit record because I might ask something I want our listeners to hear. So here we are hitting record. And I am just so curious and actually looking forward to speaking with you. Before you reached out about being a guest, I was already checking you out. So when you reached out, I was like, that's an easy yes, because I was checking you out because I felt you would be of great value to our listeners. So looking forward to our conversation. Tanessa, why don't you share with us a little bit about yourself that we may have not learned in your official bio, and then we'll jump off from there.
Yeah, so I am a mom and I'm also a business owner. My job is I work with entrepreneurs that get to that point where they're waking up, they are feeling foggy, thinking, they're not feeling very energized. They go and work on their business and everything kind of just feels like a struggle and the procrastination and we're not very productive. And then 2:00 hits and we want to take a nap. And we finally get through that grind of the end of the day and we collapse onto the couch with phone in hand, scrolling Netflix, feeling so tired all the time. And it's usually because we are caught in that doing trap and we are go, 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 go all day. And it's taking a hit on our brain and how it works. So my job is I help entrepreneurs optimize their brain so that they can have more productivity, energy growth in their business. And I do that with biohacking, specifically their sleep, what we eat, how we process and manage stress, and how we move our bodies.
Okay, so now we know. Now our listeners know exactly why you're here today, right? Perfect fit. But how did you get into this? Like, give us a little background on how you got here today, talking about biohacking and sleeping and eating and managing stress.
Yeah, well, it was a complete business evolution. Like I opened my business in 2014 and I was just doing personal training at the time. It was about a year and a half in where I had become fully booked. And most of my clients were entrepreneurs at the time. And I was like, why? You guys, what is this? I'm not marketing to entrepreneurs. Why is this happening? And they're all like, oh my gosh, I'm just so much more energized for work and so much more productive when I'm consistent with my exercise. And I was like, that is really interesting. So what I started doing is exploring all of the things surrounding fitness at that point. And the first thing was going into nutrition and really understanding how food impacted how focused and clear and productive we feel and the energy we have. And I was teaching that for a long time, both in person and with online coaching. And then I got pregnant. And I found at that point, I was like, you know what? I am going to be a very fit pregnant lady. I'm going to get myself a Fitbit. I'm going to take all the steps. Nobody warned me about the amount of pelvic pain that I could be in. So I was sidelined from that. But what I started noticing was I was watching my Fitbit and I was like, oh, interesting. This talks about my sleep. And I'm not getting nearly as good of a sleep as I thought I was. So it was more of an interest piece tracking throughout there. But when my daughter came, and naturally as a new parent, you don't get a lot of sleep. It's inconsistent. It's all over the place. And I literally tried to sit down and write an email one day and I'm like, I have nothing. Like my brain isn't working. It's swimming. It's like foggy and soupy. I have no creativity. I can't stay focused on anything. If I'm experiencing this at this level with this much sleep deprivation, I can totally imagine that my clients are experiencing this on a low level and they might not even be aware of it. So what I started doing was over the course of a few months, I started biohacking my sleep live on Instagram while I had a 3-month-old baby. And I was like, here are the things that I'm trying. And here's what's happening in my brain. And here's how it's affecting my business. And what I found was like, I opened up hours of time because of how much I could condense what I was getting done. And I was like, well, I'm going to launch a podcast and write a book with a 4-month-old sitting on my lap because my brain works better. And this is when, when she was born, it was really just like, okay, this is something that people need to know about. And hence the kind of birth of the whole biohacking our brain and helping us with our productivity.
Oh my goodness, such a great story. And, as you're sharing that, I got to be honest, like I didn't really realize how important sleep was until I also had my son almost 12 years ago. And the reason I didn't know it was so important is because I never had an issue with sleep. I always felt like I slept really well. Now, fast forward to having my son and realizing all the up and down and like inconsistent sleep. And at that time I was staying at home, right? The first few months and my husband was working. So I was definitely like on duty all night long. And while I would love to say I initially felt like I understood that it affected me, what I understood clearly is how much it affected him. So literally all the way from infant to toddler, the number one thing that we prioritized in our house was him getting good sleep. I could see this night and day difference with his temperament and how he was showing up, even as 2 and 3 years old, 4 years old. Everything revolved around nap time schedule, and it all revolved around him having a good nighttime routine to sleep through the night. And I thought, well, I'm certain this doesn't just go away like when we're adults. Like if it is having that big of an impact on my child, I started reflecting on how it had an impact on me. Which was it's these life stories where you're like, that's interesting, right? And to this day, my son is an amazing sleeper, and we prioritize sleep for him because even as a preteen, when things start getting a little hostile in the house, like talking back, the first thing I go to is like, wow, I bet he's growing. He's going through hormonal changes. I bet he needs more sleep. And so I always start there first. Anyways, long story short, our kiddos are great lesson teachers, right? They teach us the best lessons. And for me, I have been looking at ways in which I can improve my energy through sleep. I know that you may have not heard this, but I have shared on my podcast like you. So that's interesting. What does a power nap do for my energy? That's interesting. What is going to bed earlier and waking up earlier, or going to bed later and waking up later? Like really playing with these things. So totally looking forward to jumping into this. Long story short, let's jump into what brain fog is. Right? You and I are talking like we know what it is, but not every listener may know. So can you explain what brain fog is and some of the negative impacts when we have brain fog?
Yeah, well, brain fog is not something you're going to go to your doctor's office and be like, help. And they're not going to diagnose you with brain fog and send you on your way with something that'll actually help it, because it's a collection of symptoms, which is interesting enough. And what it looks like in play in our businesses is we get up and we get to our desks and our brains feel very thick and our creativity isn't there. So whether we're trying to write copy or you want to, create a podcast outline or something like that, like it's just ideas aren't coming very easy. And I find that clients are often really easily distracted when brain fog is affecting them. So whether it's a notification going off on our phone, or we have an Amazon browser that's flashing at us, that's something we need to know about. There's an Instagram message coming in. All of these things are easily distracting us. And I find that we feel just easily confused. And most of all, it's that underlying sense of fatigue that doesn't really feel like it goes away. Like you're thinking through fog. It feels clunky and cloudy.
Yeah, I feel like I have personally experienced this, and I have gone through my journey of figuring out. And I think we're going to talk about a lot of those elements. So I'll share little snippets of my own journey. But I feel like it becomes so frustrating because it's like intellectually we know what we need to do. We know what we want to do, but brain fog is like, it's like we're running in cement. That's how I make it. I feel like I'm like, no. Like yesterday I could have done this same activity so much easier, so much quicker, so much faster. But why today do I feel like I'm not getting anywhere? And so I've been really hyper aware of those days and what impacts them, which is what I'm really looking forward to jumping into. Okay, so now that we've described a brain fog, and obviously those are all negative impacts on our business. If we don't show up our best, this is what I'm always saying, if we're not showing up our best, how can we really run after those goals and achieve great things? So what is biohacking?
Oh, so this is one of those words that you'll first probably hear and you're like, that sounds a little intimidating, because it did for me. And if you go and Google it, what you'll find is the extreme end of biohacking, where people are like taking cold plunges in the ocean, we're re-injecting stem cells. But I just want to break it down in a way to kind of meet you where you're at. So look at biohacking as this. It is a way that we intentionally make changes to our external environment, whether that be our sleeping environment, the food we eat, the light that affects us in the evening, or you make changes to your internal environment. That's managing your stress, how well you're sleeping, the effects of exercise. You're making changes in those areas so that you can intentionally have more energy, focus, longevity, and wellness. Now, you might be asking like, well, how is that different from just health habits that everyone does? Well, the difference is as a biohacker, you're always looking for a return on investment. And as entrepreneurs, this is why biohacking works for us, because that is how we are geared to look at our businesses. Mm-hmm. Like if I do a webinar, am I getting the result I want from it? What is the return of investment on my ad spend? We're always looking for that, but we don't think about looking for that with our health. And what I often find is we think that we have all of these health habits that we need to take on in order to be healthy. We couldn't possibly do it while being parents and running businesses and all of this stuff. So what entrepreneurs usually do is we just say, I'll work on that later when I can, offload some of my tasks, or I can hire someone to help me with this. But what we start looking at here is by using either wearable tech, or just wearable tech. By that, I mean like, Fitbits and Oura rings and all of these things that track your data. By using either that or just subjectively measuring it and paying attention, I'm always looking at what am I getting more energy out of than I put in. Because I don't have or want to give the time to a bunch of health habits that aren't going to give me that return on investment and actually make my brain work better.
Okay. So I don't tend to use the word biohacking, but I would use a very similar word based on your description, and I call it experimenting, finding out what works best for me based on trying to solve something, right? Like for the biggest example I can come up with is for me, I actually have an affirmation that I love sleep because I do. I absolutely love sleeping. I always say I'm a girl who loves her sleep. So for me to take a power nap in the afternoon works amazing. And for my husband, it'll ruin his night sleep. He's like, I can't believe you do it. Good for you. And so I always find it so interesting that we have to find out what works for us, or find out what's the thing that's going to give us what you're saying, that return on investment, the more energy, and it's going to be different for everyone. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing, what you recognized between you and your husband is actually you've identified your chronotypes. So all of us are genetically geared to either be more of a morning person or more of an evening person. And so we actually have a gene that dictates that. And that genetic chronotype, or how your body responds in certain types of days, will dictate how much sleep you need, if naps work for you, what time you should get up, what time you should go to sleep. And there is a beautiful way, like you said, to experiment with that. And the other word I really like is optimize. It's always about finding that one step better.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So if you are talking with your clients and they are describing immense brain fog that is affecting how they show up in their business, where do you start?
I always start with sleep. And for the longest time, I used to be like, well, maybe we can do food. It really just depends. What are we most interested in at this point? Because they all work. But the longer I've been doing this, the longer I'm realizing that without a strong, solid foundation of sleep, everything else gets like 10 times harder. It gets harder to make good choices. It gets harder to have, effective decision making. So I always like to start with sleep specifically. And I know how easy it can be to say, my sleep is fine. I don't need to worry about it. We've both had that experiences pre-baby, but fascinating. And I remember being that person who would like on Instagram see stories about someone talking about sleep. And I remember skipping them and being like, no, I have this. We don't need to talk about this. But it wasn't until I actually got a Fitbit and was able to see, because we don't get a printout of our sleep quality or duration when we wake up. Like there's no report that says, good job, you achieved the right amount of dream sleep, you were a little low on your sleep duration. We don't get that. So we just guess. But the thing is when I started looking at that, I was like, I thought I was getting 8 hours of sleep per night because I went to bed at 11 and woke up at 7. But I didn't recognize at the time that a lot of my habits and my evening routine and how I conducted my health and other areas of my life were causing me to have wake ups that were about an hour to an hour and a half every night. Now, if I thought I was getting 8 hours and now I'm not accounting for this time that I'm tossing and turning and waking up and struggling to fall asleep, I'm not getting enough sleep to perform properly. So that's why I like to start with sleep, because it literally creates the brain that makes decisions on every other health habit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to share a little research I've done on my own. Okay. So before pandemic, I used to speak a lot to a lot of different audiences. And one of the main questions that I asked, or most common question that I asked opening up, is if I could wave a magic wand and gift you back 5 hours a week, what would you do with it? Now, naively, when I first started asking this question, I was like, they're going to say, work out, and they're going to say, go after my goals and do that big project, and all this other stuff was in my head. And then I heard in the back of the room, sleep. And then someone else would say sleep. And I'm like, that's interesting. And then I'd go to another audience and I'd ask the question, but now I was prepared for the answer, and I'd hear sleep and sleep. And then again and again. And so I was like, that is interesting. Kind of like your story of like, that's interesting. That wasn't the answer that I was expecting. So doing my own research and talking to different business owners, what I have come up with is the belief that sleep is one of the only things that we solely do for ourselves. And it becomes the thing that gets etched out when your spouse needs something, your kid needs something, the business needs something, an employee calls out, a family member needs something, the dishes need to get done, the laundry needs to get done. Like the list is endless on why we say we want to go to bed at this time, but it gets pushed. Or we do go to bed at that time because we're absolutely exhausted and say we'll wake up earlier so that we can what? Go into the office earlier, get into our emails. And then we normalize that to say, but the world needs something from me. And I think what you would agree with is what the world needs is you to show up your best. And if that is foundationally sleep, how do we prioritize that?
Oh, I love that. That was such a beautiful way of putting that, because it is interesting. We think, oh, I'm going to get 2 hours more of productivity and I'll just cut out 2 hours of sleep.
Yep.
But what our brains aren't registering is that by cutting out 2 hours of sleep, and not only the duration, but the processes that take care of our brain while we sleep, we are often compromising 2, 3, 4 hours of productivity the next day. Because if we'd have just gone to sleep, not only would we have gotten more done quickly the next day so that we can get on with the rest of our lives after work, but now everything is taking longer. You're more distracted. You're less efficient. You're less productive. And it was all because we thought we were getting an extra 2 hours. But really, we have to take care of our brain and think like, if my brain, if I want to show up in my business operating at 95% of my peak performance capacity, am I doing something that's knocking me back down to 50 to 60%? And am I really getting the benefit I think I am by cutting into my sleep to do more things?
Right. And so that goes back to, the quantity of time or quality of the time that you're awake and doing your productive activities. Okay, I love this. I will have this stat in our show notes because I'm going to totally hack it as I share it, but we need to share it. I remember doing this research and finding out astonishingly that long-term sleep deprivation and trying to work is worse than showing up under the influence of alcohol at work. With regards to like making mistakes and brain fog and the distraction. And my mind was blown when I found that stat. And so we'll definitely credit the correct stat and get all that in the show notes. But that's an interesting thing to think of, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's actually a cumulative of, it's so many nights in a row of less than 6 hours asleep, not time in bed. And that's the biggest thing that I learned when I really started looking at this is like, just because you plan to go to sleep and you get in bed and turn your lights out, wake up at this time, that's not all time spent asleep. So it's about 6 hours where the brain starts experiencing sleep deprivation. And what happens is the longer it continues, the less we become aware of it happening. So many of us are walking around sleep deprived. And not only are we not actually aware of it, but we're not aware of how it's affecting us. And you said like, yeah, productivity and all that. But they have actually correlated it to the equivalent of being legally drunk behind the wheel. We wouldn't drive like that. So yet we do drive sleep deprived, and it affects everything from our motor ability to our ability to respond, to our ability to think clearly and make decisions. It's fascinating what happens when our brains aren't working properly. And we look around at all our friends and our colleagues and everyone's tired when they wake up. Everyone crashes mid-afternoon. Isn't this normal? But like my question to my clients and to you guys is just like, is this normal for you? And do you want it to be normal for you? Because I love that possibility question of like, what if I didn't wake up tired every day? What if my brain worked so well and my thinking was clear and I felt focused? What would be possible for your business? And for what you got done in a day if you weren't always struggling with brain fog? I love talking about that. So good.
I know, absolutely. And I call it normalizing. Unfortunately, so many have normalized this kind of lower standard of this is just the way it is, because that's either what they, like you said, that's what they see or that's what they've experienced for so long. I do want to share also, so we are talking about productivity in the sense of how we show up, but also I'll be honest, like if my sleep's not great, I'm a bit more irritable. What about you?
Oh, I don't know who isn't. You could always tell too when my husband's not had enough sleep. I was like, I feel like you need to go to bed earlier tonight. Don't know.
Right. Don't know. I know that's what I go to first with my son, right? But it is ourselves and our spouses. And so if we're more irritable, how is that affecting how we show up as leaders in our business?
Yeah. Well,
Right?
the
We want to be a
fascinating,
good leader, and yet our employees are annoying the crap out of us. But it's because we didn't take care of ourselves, and we could probably have a little more patience and support them only if we prioritize sleep.
yeah, for sure. And actually that irritability is specifically tied very closely to lack of getting enough dream sleep, because our brain goes through different processes while we sleep. And specifically when our brain is dreaming, what it allows us to do is manage our emotional lives. So they did a really interesting experiment where they showed this group increasingly negative photos. So for example, maybe someone was injured and then a house burning down. And they found that the people that were deprived in dream sleep, or what's called REM sleep, had increasingly negative reactions to the same stimuli as someone who was well slept. And it goes on the other end. People are more likely to jump to instant gratification and skip out on doing the work, even though they had planned to do something else. You know what I mean? So that specifically looks at our brain didn't get enough dream sleep. And how does that show up in our business? It's when we get feedback from a client and we don't respond in a way that like holds space for them. And instead we are leading from our opinion or how we think they should do things. When you get a troll on Instagram, you take it very personally and it throws your whole day off, instead of just being like, yeah, that guy's probably having a bad day, or that person, that's probably their own stuff coming through. But we're not able to manage the negative and the overwhelm and the links breaking and not figuring out tech. Like, we lose our patience when we don't get enough quality sleep. It's not just about being in bed for the right amount of time. It's like, is our brain getting enough of the restorative nature that makes us good entrepreneurs?
Okay, excellent. I think you and I just did an amazing job of agitating the problem to help our listeners prioritize this. So let's just say we're all in agreement that this is something that needs to be prioritized, meaning something we're going to put our time and energy into improving. All right. So now that we're all on the same page, how do you suggest we move forward in some practical steps on improving our sleep?
So one of the most important things that we need to understand is that every process on our body operates on a clock that is running all of the time. And that clock is our biological rhythm. It's called our circadian rhythm, which just basically means my body does certain things at certain times during the day. So our hormones rise and fall at certain times, our body temperature, our heart rate, our digestion, literally everything. And when we use our schedules as a way of competing with this biological clock, we feel out of balance. So a really good example is your sleep and wake rhythms specifically follow that circadian rhythm. So by going to sleep within a 1 hour window and waking up within a 1 hour window consistently optimizes our sleep, because we have a hormone, for example, called melatonin, and its job is to help us have a good quality sleep, fall asleep, and stay asleep. Now, that hormone is optimized for you to be going to bed at a consistent time. But if we're constantly fluctuating it back and forth different times, that hormone's going to be like, I can't help you sleep. I don't know what time to start. Like, I don't know, are we going to bed at 1 tonight, or we're going to bed at 10? Like, someone please help me out. And I just read a really fascinating stat, actually, just the other day, that 87% of adults go to sleep at least 2 hours later on the weekend, which is called social jet lag. It's basically using our social schedules to inflict jet lag on our brain. And that is when a lot of brain fog pops up. It disrupts sleep quality and everything like that. So one of the most beneficial things that you can do for your sleep is to go to bed at a consistent time and wake up at a consistent time, even on weekends. And yes, we are social beings. We have lives. We do like to go out, but I'm always liking to ask the question, is what you're doing in those hours that you're staying up of adding value to your life? Because if you're out with friends or out for a really good dinner, that is a social rich experience. It's high quality leisure time. But how often are we staying up and just scrolling on our phones because we get lost down the Instagram wormhole, or we're just letting Netflix episodes roll over instead of having good quality sleep? And I usually find that we all have the intention of going to bed at a specific time. I find like we generally all think, okay, I'm going to go to bed at 10, but then it's like 11 and then 12, and then we kind of just give up. I often find that when I talk to clients about that, they'll tell me that's my me time. Like the kids are going to bed,
Mhm.
dogs walk, dinner's done. That is my time to just turn my brain off. And I often find what we're looking for in that time is a feeling. We exhaust ourselves during the day by going nonstop, taking no breaks, just literally running our brain, cognitive overload. We get to the end of the day and we are so exhausted that that's all we can do is just completely zone out.
Yep.
But we're looking for that feeling of feeling refreshed and restored, and we're not getting it. So we're like, one more episode. I just one more, thinking that that's what's going to come from that. But I read a fascinating little concept in a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And he talks about this idea of having a day within a day. So we often think that our days are our work hours. And then the rest is just kind of the leftover where everything gets crammed into. But he talked about the idea of being intentional with that time. And I often find that when I work with clients, if I can cultivate the good use of that time, meaning they're actually doing things that make them feel refreshed and restored, that they don't need to be staying up 2, 3, 4 hours past bedtime just to get that me time, because they get that feeling quicker. And so they don't need to use bedtime as a way to affect that. And that's really what helps them start thinking a lot more clearly and feeling restored and refreshed on the way into sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. I have found the same thing to be true. I think that it's so interesting that in general, as parents, can take it back to parenting, we have bedtimes for our kids because we know they need to go to bed at a certain time to wake up without a fight and a fit, and then to go on to their day. And then we think it's different for us because now we're the boss. We're like, oh, just one more show, just one more, like you were saying. And so it's lack of self-discipline. Would you agree with that? Like they know that they would function better if we went to bed at say 10 than midnight. But in that moment when our willpower is the least, when we are telling ourselves, I deserve another show, I deserve another whatever, that you are rationalizing choosing something that you know ultimately isn't the best for you.
Yeah, I think it's partly a willpower and like a discipline thing, but I also think we are very aware at the same time. And I think there's a really conscious level of choice that's happening there where it's like, I know I'm not going to feel better tomorrow. I know that my sleep has been a mess this week, but this feels better now.
What a great point.
Right. And I think we are aware of that. And one of the things that I always like to share is the idea of we are always selling ourselves on something. So in those moments, you are selling yourself on the idea that staying up now will feel better than feeling focused, clear, and productive tomorrow. You are actively selling that. There are thoughts going through our head that are creating that feeling of like, I deserve this, I want this. So I often ask my clients, like, what if you sold yourself on the idea of going to bed instead? What if you put just as much effort into selling yourself on going to bed? Because like for me, I cannot wait to take my makeup off. I cannot wait to throw my hair up in a bun. I love putting on my PJs, crawling into bed. Husband is usually there, and I'm always reading a book. And I love reading, and I love how it feels. I like the feeling of falling asleep with a book in my hand. I like the feeling of closing out a day with something I love and that feels restorative to me. I sell myself on that vision. Every time Netflix asks me, do you want to play another episode? I was like, yes, I want another episode. Like we just finished watching Inventing Anna and we were like, must stop now. So nothing wrong with Netflix. Like we watch it, but I am at that moment having to sell myself on sleep instead of selling myself on another episode. And I feel like that's the skill set that is missing sometimes, that makes it feel like, well, it's my willpower. It's my fault. I can't do it.
Right, right. You know, with business ownership, we have so much freedom with our schedules. And I often hear from my clients, like, I think I need to start my day at the same time every day. This is what I hear. I'm like, okay, so what's stopping you? I just wake up so tired, so exhausted. I'm hitting snooze. Or I'm starting my work day on time, but we're squeezing out working out or any kind of morning routine that is for themselves, right? To set themselves up for a successful day. And it always goes back to, if there's one thing you can focus on, is it bedtime? Once bedtime is taken care of, waking up at the same time, restored and refreshed, is so much easier. So I love that we're talking all about like focusing on bedtime, because today, what happened today started yesterday with yesterday's decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what the interesting thing you said was, by committing to bedtime, as that is the one habit that I think will anchor in so many things, is it allows you, like we talked about, to get into that consistent circadian rhythm. So we were talking about your clients that wake up feeling groggy all the time. Well, there's this really interesting thing that happens called sleep inertia when we are using alarm clocks to artificially terminate sleep. Like, we're the only species that does that. I don't see deer out there with an alarm clock saying it's 6 a.m. We should probably get up right now. But the interesting thing is the alarm clock dictates what phase of sleep our brain gets pulled out of when we wake up. So just to simplify it, your brain is most of the time either dreaming, in deep sleep, or in light sleep. If your alarm clock goes off during dream sleep, it can take you up to half an hour to break through that weird foggy feeling that you feel when you wake up. And this is called sleep inertia. It's sleep that's carried over. Now, if your alarm clock goes off while you are in a deep sleep cycle, it can take, and this is depending on your genetic chronotype, up to 4 hours for your brain to start working. And most of us are at our desk by then trying to do stuff.
Right.
So by maintaining a consistent bedtime, what starts happening is you optimize your body temperature, your hormones, and your heart rates to wake up at the same time. So you no longer need an alarm clock, and your brain is not naturally going to be like, let's wake her up during deep sleep and really mess with her morning. Your brain is naturally going to be like, okay, let's wrap this up. Okay, we're going to get into light sleep now. Let's pull you out as, oh, doesn't this feel nice? Okay, you're awake. And look at that. You're awake usually within a 30-minute window every single morning. And sometimes, we have backup alarms in case we're catching up on sleep. But by anchoring in that bedtime, it naturally anchors in the morning. And because you no longer need to rely on that alarm clock, you are not ending sleep and terminating it artificially in a way that creates that groggy feeling that drags throughout your morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I've also experimented with that, is not having an alarm clock in the morning. And one thing that I would share with you, my listeners know this, is that I love a good morning routine. So all the reward is that I go to bed at a specific time so that I'm waking up naturally in the morning early, like I'm talking 5 a.m., so that I can have this long extended morning routine before even my son wakes up or the day with work starts. And for me, I sell myself on sleeping at a specific time. That is not great for your social status, by the way, because you are, look, I go to bed by 9 o'clock every night. And so when you say that we need to be in a similar time zone on the weekend, it's like, yeah, dinner reservations at the steakhouse. And my husband and I look at each other, we're like, 6 o'clock sound good? 6 o'clock sounds like a wild night, babe. Let's do it. because whether we want to stay up or not, our bodies are naturally starting to shut down. And then it's not even a great time anyways on the weekends. Anyways, the point is, I've sold myself so much on going to bed at a specific time that it doesn't even feel like selling myself, because the reward is I can't wait to wake up and have a slow morning and drink my coffee. It's very much like you were speaking of your bedtime routine and how great that feels to you.
Oh, totally. And I always think too, and I am exceptionally protective on it on work nights. Like on the weekends, if I end up pushing it half an hour or an hour, I'm like, this is okay if I'm a little more tired tomorrow. But on the days where there are days where I'll have like a couple podcast interviews and a couple client interviews lined up, and I'll want to do some focused work in the morning. I know how it feels to show up to those days with brain fog. Yeah. I don't want to represent my business like that. And on top of that, I don't want to spend half of the day moving tasks across my Trello board to a future day where I'm like, oh, well, that didn't get done today either. I guess that's all piling up tomorrow. And then you wake up the next day and you're still tired from the day before and you got more to do than you expect. I don't enjoy that. That doesn't feel good to me. So that's just like definite big point in just, I love to get a good sleep. I'm like you. I'm asleep, honestly, between 8:45 and 9 every single night. But that's also my chronotype. That doesn't mean that's
Yeah.
what works best for everyone, but that is where my brain lights up like a Christmas tree.
Right. I love that you said that. So all of this that you and I are sharing with specifics to what works for us is only specific to us. And I acknowledge that all the time. And I'm glad you do as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So give us some, like, if we have the belief because we have evidence that says, I have a really hard time falling asleep. I am not a great sleeper. Like, I am exhausted all the time. That is your truth now. What can someone do right when they're done listening to today's episode to improve tonight's sleep and tomorrow's and the next night?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple places we can go with this, but let's talk about falling asleep and the midnight wake ups, because those I hear all the time. So it actually comes back to looking at food, I think, as one of the biggest things to make a difference with that. So just to give you a very brief overview, when we eat food, specifically foods that are higher in carbohydrates, our blood sugar goes up when we eat. Now, the more our blood sugar fluctuates during a day, it's called your glycemic variability. The more that fluctuates during a day, the more brain fog that creates. Now, when we are eating within 3 hours of bed specifically, there's a couple things that happen. Our digestion needs to ramp up when it really wants to be ramping down. Our body temperature goes up, which messes with a bunch of sleep hormones and makes it very hard to have sound sleep. And our heart rate speeds up because we're digesting. All of these things are counter to sleep. So when we eat within the 3 hours before bed, you'll often find that you toss and turn, or you wake up a lot, or you struggle falling asleep. The other thing that happens is when we have really dense carbohydrate meals at night, the hormone that actually helps us lower blood sugar doesn't work very well at night. So we get a swing in blood sugar that goes up and it doesn't come down very much. So during the night, we have this sustained high blood sugar, and that is associated with increased cortisol. So what happens is we lay there at night and stare at the ceiling and we're like, oh my gosh, if I get to sleep now, then let's see this, it's 5 a.m. and it's 11 now. If I count backwards, that's 7 hours. We start doing that game where we're playing the sleep math game. And these are often the clients that are having these late carbohydrate dense meals are waking up in the middle of their night and their brain turns on and goes into like, okay, today's to-do list. First thing we got to do is we got to do this, and then we got to do this. And oh my gosh, and let's worry about yesterday and worry about tomorrow. If your brain is doing that, the first thing I would look at actually is your dinner and what is going on with that. And are we causing that because of fluctuating blood sugar levels? So that's big thing number one. Big thing number two is going to be your evening routine. Here's what I find entrepreneurs are super guilty of. We go all day, and we keep our brain on fire, basically. So we're receiving input from Instagram. We're receiving input from the TV. There's blue light coming from our screen. We are overloading all the cognitive abilities of our brain. And then we decide to turn our lights out and we're like, why isn't my brain geared down?
Right.
So what I like to look at is we have two main states our brains operate in. Well, two main states we should be operating our brains in. One is called beta, and it's basically how fast your brain waves are going. During beta brainwaves, we are focused, alert, attentive, and ready to, see the bear that's running towards us. That's what our bodies, we're in, there's that little bit of fight or flight. This is what we are when we're in our business, tackling our to-do list, running errands, and all of that kind of stuff. If we try to go into sleep while our brain is still in beta, we will have a very hard time falling asleep because cortisol is elevated. That's our stress hormone. And also, it's keeping us up during the night by preventing us from having deep quality sleep. So what I often invite my clients to consider and invite you to consider is there is an alternative state called alpha. And alpha is not so much a series of activities, but a way your brain feels. So we talked earlier about feeling restored and refreshed, right? So we want to be engaging in activities the hour before bed that create that alpha feeling. And it's removing stimulation, both mental stimulation from like our TVs and our phones, but also light stimulation. Like our brains are exceptionally sensitive to color and intensity of light in the evening. So we're really wanting to modulate that. And a really good example of an activity that can be both beta and alpha is reading. So if you give me a nutrition book, or if you give me a sleep book or a business book, I have my highlighters out and my sticky notes and I'm thinking about content. My brain is in beta. Alternatively, I can pick up a book that is a romance story or whatever I'm in. Maybe it's a law story. And my brain goes into alpha and it's relaxed and I'm feeling sleepy and it's a story. So looking at the activities is not really the thing to do, but how you feel from the activities you're doing in the hour before bed. And you want them to engage your brain in that alpha state so that you can slip easily into sleep with a lower cortisol level. And that means less wake ups.
So interesting. You know, what is coming up for me as I'm listening to this is that it sounds like the work that you do is, okay, first you focus on this, and then it might be that they have a little bit too much stress and they might have, you know, too many stress hormones, and it might be food or a food intolerance. And it's almost like this whole thing where you're saying, let's explore and work through each of these all in the pursuit of showing up our best, which is without brain fog and clear and energetic and even killed emotionally. And it really is all these inputs that contribute to the negative or positive experience that we're feeling in our business and lives. Is that accurate? It's not a one size fits all solution is my point. Is that correct?
That's exactly it. Because, you know, there are I've got lists of things that we could do if you're waking up in the middle of the night or, you know, if you're having trouble falling asleep. Those are all different things that cue to me okay, I'm going to start running through this list of experiments. But the key in that is being okay, this week, we are going to maybe turn off all tech an hour before bed. Or this week, we are going to get some high quality blackout curtains on our window because the sun is entering our bedroom too early in the morning. Right. And what I love to do is then either subjectively or using data from all the wearable trackers that are available now, I like to look for a result. Are we feeling more well rested? Did our sleep quality improve? Is our body's stress score, which is it's known as your heart rate variability, is that being positively affected? If not, we skip it. We don't spend any more time on it. If it is, we keep it and we layer on one thing at a time. So like what you said, it's not always going to be this thing for everybody, but these are the things our go-tos that we usually find work the best. And then we layer from there.
Absolutely. So once somebody has decided that this is an issue, a challenge, and two, prioritized it to focus on solutions, how much time goes by that they get one night at good sleep, 3 nights good sleep, that they're experiencing the benefits? Is it instant, first night good sleep, oh my gosh, I feel amazing? Or that my question is that because it is so long-term that they have, been sleep deprived, does it take a long time to get out of that sleep deprivation?
It's a little bit individual, and it's also a little bit depending on the biohack you put in place. So we talked about going to bed and waking up at the same time. I usually have found, after I love looking at spreadsheets of my clients' data and then, making graphs and highlighting things, and it's just so easy to see what works. But I look, and what I have found with the circadian rhythm reset, when you're just I'm going to commit to go to bed and wake up at the same time, I find that it takes about 2 to 3 weeks with that one, because you're having to readjust a lot of things, how your hormones are working, your sleep wake cycle. You're probably waking up at a different time, and it's not going to, flow that first week, because you're going to be I'm not tired yet, or I'm too tired and I want to go to sleep early. So things like that. But then there are things like removing blue light before bed that can happen as fast as 3 days, because blue light entering our eyes from our tech has actually been shown to have a 72-hour effect on melatonin production. So if you look at screens one night, you're still suffering from sleep quality issues 3 days later from that. So it's looking at that over time. And it really does depend on the hack too. But my rule of thumb, everything gets a week. Everything gets a week. And then we really start being okay, am I feeling anything different? And if not, we keep it going. Maybe it's another week, but I like a week at least.
Okay, excellent. You have referenced wearable, what do you keep calling it? Wearable data, tech. Tech. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm hearing data, because we were nerding out about data before we hit record. Okay, so wearable tech that gives you the data. What are some of your favorites? Because I think you're wearing one right now. You're talking with your hands. Okay, I was going to say, when you're talking with your hands, I'm staring at your ring. Is that wearable tech? Okay. Yeah.
So I wear two, and I've worked with clients with both of them as well. And they have different features. And The one I wear is a wearable. The very first one I had is just a basic Fitbit, and the Fitbit Lux is often what I'll work with clients now because it gives you everything you need to know in terms of activity, steps, sleep duration, sleep quality, how your body responds to stress and all of that kind of stuff. And you can either look at it in graphs on the app or you can export it and make fun charts with it in Google Sheets, like what I do with it, which I don't think many people do. But beyond that, the other one I'm wearing is an Oura ring. So this ring specifically is about tracking. It's kind of like, if you are obsessed with knowing all the things, like if you want to know what your average breathing rate was last night, how your temperature fluctuated during the night, if you want to know all the details about how many minutes it took you to fall asleep, that is what the Oura ring is for. So that's what I find for most people, what they'll ever need to know. A basic Fitbit will do the job, but the Oura ring is like, I just want to know everything. I want to be completely optimized, but they're both really effective at giving you the data you need to start assessing like, hey, that's working, or hey, this isn't working so well.
Yeah. The reason I love, kind of rounding out today's conversation on that is because in business, like you were talking earlier about business owners want a return on investment. Mm-hmm. We also need to make good strategic business decisions based off good data and data that we're not telling ourselves stories about, but like, what does the data tell us to course correct and make different decisions? So we're training ourselves to do that as good business owners and CEOs in our business. And yet we can also be doing that same thing in our personal life with like what you're sharing here about the wearable tech, looking at the data, and then making different decisions based on what the data is telling you.
Yeah, I think it's one of the lowest cost investments you can make in your business that has the biggest effect. I mean, I don't know.
Did you just say I get to write off the Oura ring? Just joking.
I do. Yes. It's also research when I do it too, which is a fun thing. But like, I'm like, oh yes, I will try all the new tech on the market because it is research, and that I then pass on to my clients.
Okay, yeah, that's so awesome. Okay, that's great. Because the reason it caught my eye too is because my husband and I were just talking about that ring, and so now that I saw someone wearing it, I was like, oh, that looks nice.
Oh yeah, well, and that's what I think. Like, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I spend tens of thousands of dollars on my own coaching in business and in personal coaching every year. The software that I purchased for my business, our CRMs, are everything that we put money to in our business. And we need to, what if we just spend a couple $100s on figuring out if we can get our brain a little clearer? And that's why I think, like, honestly, it's the cheapest and best investment you can make in your productivity, because your productivity is dependent on your energy. And your energy, in order to sustain it, you need to know what is killing it and what is fostering it, and then making sure you're adjusting where you're spending your time appropriately.
Absolutely. I will close out with my last comment to say that while the word time management is a common term that everyone can agree is a worthwhile topic, what's not common is to talk about energy management. And for me, it's usually far more of an issue to manage our energy than it is time. And my opinion is, like, we have the same 24 hours, but I guarantee I'm running out of energy before I'm running out of time at the end of the day. And I'm running out of energy before I'm ready to, step out of the office for the day, because not me now, but like I have been, and this is with clients. It's like, for me, it was so important to look at the energy management, even more so over the time management, that came second to figuring out how do I show up my best consistently throughout the whole day. Yes. And so with that being said, is like, thank you for this conversation, because, getting good sleep and having a clear mind is all about energy management consistently throughout the day.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. If we have the energy, everything else becomes easier.
Yes. Okay. Oh my goodness. That was a great way to close it out. I believe you have something special for our listeners if they want to learn more and dig deeper into this topic. So if you can share with them how to get that and what that is, that would be great.
Yeah. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're finding that you're waking up feeling groggy and it's affecting how your brain works and you're feeling like you're not getting as much done during the day as you like, I've created an entrepreneur's playbook called 12 Ways to Biohack Your Energy. And it's a collection of the 12 biohacks that I've worked on with myself and with my clients that get you the most bang for your buck in terms of having that energy when you wake up, feeling well rested and being productive in your business. So that's at TanessaShears.com/ energies, you can grab that for free there. But beyond that, if you're just like, oh, I want to go really deep on like sleep quality or really deep on brain waves, I have a podcast called Becoming Limitless, and every episode is dedicated to one specific biohack for entrepreneurs and how it affects your business. So it's full of all the good nitty gritty and the science and the nerding out on how we can make our brains work better.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And if they want to find you, whether it's your website or social media, where do they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, just at Tanessa Shears.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being an amazing guest and having a great conversation about something that is truly, truly important to all of us. Thanks for coming on to Productivity Straight Talk. I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk. And I sure hope you found my conversation with Tanessa to be inspiring and impactful. Inspiring in the sense of it empowers you and inspires you to prioritize sleep, to prioritize your own self-care, to prioritize your own mental well-being. These are very, very important areas of our lives that if we don't prioritize, really, truly, no one else will do that for you. And so this is my call to you from my heart to yours. You deserve to prioritize yourself. You deserve to prioritize yourself so that you can show up as the best partner to the ones you love. If you're a parent, to your community, to your team members, to your clients, everybody needs and wants something from us. And the only way we can show up and give to the things that matter most to us is if we take a stand and prioritize ourselves. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So before you pull into the house or to your next appointment and tune out of today's episode, I want you to just sit for a moment and give yourself the gift of being decisive and deciding what is the next small step you can take to prioritize yourself. I really want to continue supporting you. So if you want to dig deeper than what you're getting here at Productivity Straight Talk Podcast, and you would love to get business strategy and coaching and training and accountability, then I would love for you to check out my Leverage Lab program. You can learn more and join us by heading on over to amberdelagarza.com/Leverage Lab. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.